All right.
Hey,
Welcome to the Mormon Marriages podcast.
this is our first one with our new background.
We're doing it on video. It's so exciting.
It's
Thanks
fun for us.
Thanks for hanging out with us today, guys. So, when we started the podcast, we wanted this to be a platform where we could talk about difficult things. So, if you go back through our podcast history, like many of you have, you'll see that we've talked about everything from infertility to suicide to having a mixed faith marriage when your beliefs change as a couple. And every so often we get a chance to also sit down without a guest and just like have a conversation with you, just the two of us. And we've been kind of like going through some stuff as a couple. And we thought this would make a really great opportunity to give you kind of a glimpse into our lives and what we have going on. And also maybe it might be helpful to somebody out there who might be going through similar stuff. So do you want to tell?
And it's also helpful to talk about it,
It is.
to get a little bit vulnerable.
Do you want to tell everybody what's going on?
Sure. So we've been open with our desire to start a family and have talked probably in more detail on the podcast than people have ever wanted to know about.
Yeah.
But a few weeks ago, we found out that we were expecting. And we were really excited, and
It works.
we had been worried about possibly not being able to get pregnant, and so we felt all these emotions of excitement and joy, and we immediately wanted to tell everyone, but we resisted and only told a few people. We told our parents and a couple of friends.
A couple of very close friends.
About this excitement in our lives. And then shortly after, I would say maybe 5 or 6 days later, we found out that we were having a miscarriage instead. So, I tell myself I'm okay, and then when I speak it out loud, I get emotional. I've been crying at the drop of a hat lately. I have a lot of mixed emotions around it. When we found out that we were pregnant, it didn't feel real. And I just felt like something was off a little bit. And then when I started bleeding heavily, I just had a pit in my stomach and just kind of knew that it wasn't going to pan out the way we'd hoped. So I called my doctor, and they sent us to get some blood drawn to check my pregnancy hormone levels, and they came back practically nothing, which indicated that the pregnancy was no longer viable. And that was that. It was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
It was a whirlwind of emotions.
So you might be wondering why we're sharing this. Because one thing we've noticed just as we've kind of started into this kind of journey of being married and wanting to grow our family is that, you know, like when we told my parents, one of the first things my mom said is, wow, you guys are early. I'm surprised you told us.
We told them the day we found out.
Yeah, the day we found out.
And I took one of those early pregnancy tests, so we found out early on that.
And we wasted no time sharing
did not.
with people what was going on. And so her reaction was, wow, I'm surprised you told us. Normally people keep this kind of on the down low until they get, you know, through the majority of the first trimester and they know that the pregnancy is viable. And we thought about that. And I remember interviewing, do you remember interviewing the Beckstrands?
Yes, of course I remember interviewing them.
That was one of my favorite interviews. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they talked about is when they were doing infertility treatments, being willing to be very hopeful knowing that the end result could be catastrophic sadness.
Right.
And but if you don't have that hope, if you don't kind of put everything on the line, if you don't celebrate, if you don't have a lot of faith, you're just going to be constantly walking through this journey waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then if something great happens, it's hard to feel the fullness of the joy.
Right. Because
you know what I mean?
still have that tentative attitude
Right.
towards the situation. You're approaching it very cautiously.
So
And it's because it's scary.
Yeah.
The thought of being disappointed is terrifying. And so I think sometimes we put up these barriers, these protective barriers around our hearts that don't let us feel too much. Because then if it gets taken away from us, it won't hurt that bad.
Yeah.
I think
That's a good summary of that.
That's what we do.
Well said.
Before we delve too deep into that, I kind of want to know what your experience has been.
You recorded a video of me finding out that you were pregnant, which maybe we'll share it with you. For me, like, I didn't get a chance to really connect with our little sesame seed.
Mm-hmm. That's the size of the baby before we miscarried.
I mean, it didn't really impact me. What impacted me the most was knowing that you were suffering.
Yeah.
I tend to not be much of a worrier for most things. And so I came into this knowing that this was a possibility. You know, something like 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in a miscarriage or something happens. And so I kind of came into this realizing, like, if there's a possibility that this might happen. And because it was so early on, I didn't have an opportunity to get super attached. But I watched you, like, for me, I've watched you since we got married want to become a mom. You know, you've always had this hope. And to see this hope start to become a reality for you and realize, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a baby. And then just a few days later to have that taken away, that was hard. Like, that was really, really sad. So that was the hardest part for me, was just knowing that my wife was suffering and there was nothing I could do about it other than just try and create some sort of space for you to be sad for as long as you needed to be sad.
Mm-hmm. It was really weird because we found out, and then it wasn't very long after that we miscarried, and so it just felt
Excuse me.
almost like a dream. It was this weird mixture of emotions because, like Nate said, it didn't really have time to settle in yet. It didn't feel real yet. And so because I was only 5 weeks along, I felt almost weird for being so sad. Yeah. Because it wasn't a reality that had time to sink in quite yet for me.
And it kind of gives you perspective on people who do go through that, where they have
later term
miscarriages,
right,
which has to just be brutal.
And so then shortly after, I started feeling much better and hopeful and at peace about it and excited for the future and to try again. And then I would have days where I'd just be so sad. It was just this roller coaster of, oh, I'm fine, everything's great, it wasn't that big of a deal, to actually it was kind of a big deal. Yeah. Again, this weird mixture of emotions of not quite knowing.
Of like trying to minimize your pain and also like feel the pain and.
Right. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah.
But going back to our sharing it with people, so there were a few people that we shared it with, and then when we miscarried, because we had shared it with certain people, we had to go tell them. We had to tell them, oh, just kidding, this exciting thing is no longer happening. And the cool thing behind that was that not only did we have these people that we wanted to share our joy with, but now we had these people who could share our pain and who could bear our burdens a little bit. I had a friend come over that day and bring me flowers. We had friends drop us off dinner on our porch. They didn't even knock on the door and come say hi because they wanted to give us space, but they dropped off some soup and some cookies and showed their support in that way. I had a friend send me some crumble cookies a little bit later, just telling me she was thinking about me, and other people have come and given me hugs and have cried with me when they found out and hugged me, and just
and more people knew than typically, because Angeline is a nurse.
Right.
And you have to let your work know if you're pregnant, because there's certain patients you can't take care of.
So I had a couple of coworkers.
Several coworkers knew. So it's not like we went out and told 30 people.
Right. No.
But anyway.
Again, like this is still a very small group. A small group of people that we chose to share with was also the small group of people that shared our pain. And to me, it was kind of beautiful.
It's awesome.
It was beautiful to know that there are people
who love us.
And want to be there for not only when the good things happen, but also to be there to just sit with us when we're sad.
And I think it's tempting in the culture of the church. We're taught to serve and to uplift over others and help them carry their burdens. But part of that task is knowing and understanding what each other's burdens are, knowing what your friends and neighbors are going through. And unless you're willing to share what you're going through, there's not anybody there to uplift you.
Right.
There's nobody there to have your back. And sometimes being a member of the church or any community can feel lonely. And in large part, I think it can feel lonely because we're not willing to offer people an opportunity into our hearts and into our lives and into our struggles, so that they can be aware of like what our needs are. I think we bond through going through trials together in a lot of ways. That's not the only way we bond, but it's a great way to bond. And if we go through life without sharing our joys with others and without sharing our pains with others, then it's going to be a very lonely and solitary life. So I guess part of this conversation is maybe challenging you. What are some things that you're trying to hide from other people? You know, why do this topic in general, like getting pregnant and having a miscarriage, why can't we celebrate right when we find out that we're pregnant? And yes, it might mean that we're going to mourn a little bit more if we find out that we're not, but man, like it's such a cool thing to celebrate. And it was so fun having people be ecstatic for us. And it was so powerful to have people cry with us when it didn't work out. And to me, like, there's nothing more beautiful in life than having friendships like that. And I can't imagine having gone through that, just the two of us, without letting our parents in or letting that close circle of friends in to participate in the joy and in the sadness with us.
It would have been really hard for me, I think, to have felt like I had this big weight on me and then trying to go out and be normal because nobody knew about it.
Yeah.
It was so comforting to know that there were people who I could talk to about it. And we talked about this a little bit in Relief Society today. We talked about there's a talk by President Eyring about women and our role as women to help other people reach their potential. And there was a quote by, I think it was President Nielsen, that talks about how she molds a living clay into the shape of her hopes. And we talked about how being able to have that kind of an influence on other people and to allow other people to have that kind of an influence on you requires being vulnerable and requires opening yourself up to people in a way that is super scary. Like, it's terrifying.
Scary talking about this right now.
Right. It's terrifying to share those raw and sensitive parts of yourself. But that is truly the only way that we can live our baptismal covenants of bearing each other's burdens, mourning with those that mourn, comforting those that stand in need of comfort. We have to be able to know those things in people's lives that they're mourning about.
Yeah.
Or that they need comfort from. But it's scary. And I want to speak to that. It's very scary to talk about it.
So maybe we can wrap up this interview or this conversation talking about things that you can do to start maybe opening up a little bit. Because one of the things I would advise against is walking up to somebody you don't know very well and just dumping all of your biggest problems on them.
Or sharing it like so freely on social media.
Yeah, don't cast your pearls before swine.
Right.
I would say a great way to start is find something small and share it with somebody that you care about and that loves you and see how they respond. I think that's a really great place to start, is start small and start gradual. And as you start to see how people respond to you, like I know you could count on one hand and I could count on one hand. We could easily count 5 people each that if we really needed something, we could turn to them and ask for anything and they would give it to us.
Yeah.
And that comes in large part as a result of having started really small and building up that trust over time. Right.
Just like most everything we talk about on the podcast, I think this is a skill to be learned.
Yeah.
That takes practice and takes kind of getting more comfortable with. The more and more that you do it, the more and more comfortable you are with sharing.
Yeah.
And the more you'll find those people who you can trust. Because it's like Nate said, find something small, share it with somebody, and see how they react, and see if that person is worthy of your trust in the future. Because sometimes people aren't going to respond the way that you would hope they would. And then okay, maybe they're not the kind of person that I want to share something even more personal with.
Yeah, and on the flip side, if somebody chooses to share something with you, there's an appropriate way to respond.
Yeah.
So, we're not sharing this with everybody today because we're hoping to get a whole bunch of emails and messages from people saying, we're so sorry, we love you. We're okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're
okay.
We're not dying.
Again, I'm okay
and
until I say it out loud, and then I start to...
Well, it's okay, to be sad about it.
Yeah.
There's totally space for that for as long as you need.
Yeah.
But we're not sharing this so we can get sympathy from people. And also we know that there's so many people out there who have it way worse than us. People who've lost children or who've lost babies early or later on in their pregnancy, and we don't want to diminish that pain at all. And essentially, we're just trying to lead by example, I think, a little bit. Mm-hmm. So if somebody approaches you, I digress. If somebody approaches you with something that's a little bit difficult, some great pointers for how to receive that information would be to be empathetic. And that word, that's a really easy thing to say, but to conceptualize that, I think a really great way to conceptualize that is, can I tell them about what happened right before we got pregnant? You got pregnant?
I'm not sure what you're talking about, but go for it.
Okay. So a couple days before we found out Angeline was pregnant, I got really sick, and then Angeline got really sick as well.
Oh.
And it was the type of sick that was it was violently sick. It was rough. Mm-hmm. Everything on the insides wanted to get on the outsides.
It's our body hit the eject button.
Yes.
And everything must go.
It was not a slow exit. It was a very abrupt exit. And when your partner is that sick and it's 1:30 in the morning and they're throwing up and just have a fever and they just feel absolutely miserable, the only thing you can do is go over and be like, wow, this really sucks. You can't go, well, what did you eat? Well, why did you put that in your body? What happened? What is it that made you sick? And you can't go on an investigation to try and solve the problem. You can't force medicine into their body when it's just trying to get rid of everything. There's just not a whole lot you can do other than sitting next to them and just being like this. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. This sucks so bad. Uh-huh. Is there anything else in there? Can you get it out? I just want you to feel better. I'm so sorry. This really sucks. And that's empathy. Mm-hmm. And when somebody comes to you with an emotional or something they've experienced that's causing them some sort of spiritual or emotional sickness, the best thing you can do is what I refer to as holding the emotional garbage can. You just hold the garbage can out in front of them and let them go, this is all the stuff that I'm feeling and experiencing. And you go, oh, that really sucks. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Oh, this is really terrible. Anything else? Yep. And they just get it all out of their system.
Right. And we've talked about this before because it's
It's important.
It's really important.
But that is empathy. Empathy is holding the emotional garbage can so the person that you're talking to can get it all out of their system and feel a little bit better. They can feel heard, understood, validated, and that's the goal.
Right.
So,
and if you have no idea what they're going through, if you've never experienced anything like that, you can still show empathy. You don't have to have gone through something similar, and you don't have to talk about something similar either. It can just be like, that must be so hard for you.
That sounds so crappy.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
This must be hard. I say that all the time. That sounds so hard. That's like my go-to. That sounds so hard. And really, that's what people need. They just need someone to listen. And
that's what you need.
Yeah.
So be willing to let people into your life. And if somebody lets you in, show them empathy. And I think that is what it means to be brothers and sisters in the gospel. I think that is why we have wards and relief societies and elders quorums, so we can create brotherhoods and sisterhoods of support and love for each other. And if we don't ever let other people in, we don't get the support, and then we just feel lonely. And then church becomes hard, and life becomes hard, and friendships become hard, and it's like you're living two separate lives, and I don't think that's what we want. So.
And I think the other side of this, I think an important lesson I learned was I would much rather feel excited and feel joyful about something, even if that means feeling pain later. And we reach the highest potential of joy when we have experienced the lowest of lows. So it's like, to the degree of which you have felt pain is the degree to which you can feel joy. And so let yourself feel the feels, all of them, the good and the bad, and you'll be okay. That's something I learned, is that
Love it.
I'm going to be okay. Even though it hurts, it's okay.
Yep.
That's all there is to say.
It's a good way to end it, I think. How about you?
I think that's good. Thank you for listening to us and for sharing in our life stories and giving us a platform to be open.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye, everyone.